The day started like any other summer morning at our lake cabin. The sun sparkled off the water, birds chirped, and the gentle hum of life in the community was peaceful, except for Karen, of course. That woman had a talent for turning tranquility into chaos. It all began when my wife mentioned a minor fine we had supposedly accrued for a lake cabin regulation violation. The notice was vague, the language intentionally intimidating, and the deadline for payment absurdly short. Normally, I'd handle HOA disputes with logic and evidence, but this time my wife, ever meticulous, decided to ignore it. After all, she knew the fine was completely unjustified. Karen, however, was oblivious to whom she was dealing with. By mid-morning, I noticed a flurry of messages and calls from the HOA office. Karen had been running around like a headless chicken, barking at her minions, trying to enforce the fine. She had no idea that my wife wasn't just any homeowner. She was a federal judge, trained in law, procedure, and the art of dismantling threats with precision. Karen's ignorance was about to meet reality in the most humiliating way possible. As Karen stormed up the small path to our lake cabin, documents in hand, I could see her shaking with anger and determination. She assumed that authority, or at least the perception of it, was enough to bend us to her will. She was very wrong. My wife, calm and unbothered, stepped outside to greet her. Karen tried her usual intimidating spiel, pointing at papers and threatening legal repercussions. "Do you realize the consequences if you refuse to pay this fine immediately?" Karen snapped, waving the papers like they carried some magical power. My wife raised a single eyebrow, smiled faintly, and responded in a calm, measured voice that froze Karen in place. "I do, actually, and I also know that your actions here constitute harassment, misrepresentation of HOA authority, and could very well expose you to serious legal penalties. Since you're threatening me over a baseless fine, I'd suggest you leave before your entire HOA board is summoned into federal court." Karen's jaw dropped. Her face turned red, a mix of fury and panic. The sheer weight of the words, coming from someone who literally upheld the law at the highest levels, was enough to make her stammer. She had no idea she was trying to intimidate a federal judge who could, in an instant, dismantle her entire little empire of arbitrary rules and fines. "Why, you don't understand. This is an HOA matter. You can't," she sputtered, but my wife interrupted, voice icy and unwavering. "I understand perfectly. And you should know that HOA rules do not supersede federal law, nor do they allow for harassment or intimidation. If you continue, you're inviting serious consequences for yourself and the HOA." Karen glanced around nervously, realizing for the first time that the neighbors watching were seeing her get publicly shut down. Her confidence evaporated like morning fog. The HOA staff she had summoned were pale, silent, and clearly reconsidering their loyalty. My wife's calm authority had completely neutralized the threat. Karen turned to retreat, flailing with words that had no power anymore. I'm just doing my job," she shouted. "And your job, apparently, is to learn humility," my wife replied smoothly, shutting the door behind her. The fine remained unpaid, the cabin remained ours, and Karen had no recourse. Her entire facade of authority crumbled in a matter of minutes. By sunset, Karen's rage had transformed into simmering resentment, but she knew better than to approach again. The HOA board, now aware of the potential legal consequences, quickly issued a formal apology and promised not to pursue the matter further. My wife, ever gracious, let them off with just a warning, having made it crystal clear that any further attempts would be met with swift and uncompromising legal action. As we watched the sun dip below the horizon, I leaned back and said, "Well, that went better than expected." My wife smiled. "Karen doesn't understand yet, but she will. Some lessons are learned the hard way, and this was a very hard lesson. It was a simple reminder that authority and intimidation only work when wielded against those without power. Against someone trained in the law, arrogance crumbles fast, and truth shines brighter than any threat." Karen had learned, painfully and publicly, that the lake cabin and our peace was untouchable.